In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down how to know if you should buy a single family or a small multifamily unit for your first Section 8 investment. Let's dive right into the video today. Like I said, the main goal of this video is to help you guys determine which asset class, whether it be a single family or a small multifamily unit, should be your first Section 8 investment and how to know how to make the choice between the two of them. So like I said, it's not really about which one is better. Both asset classes have pros and cons and different risk factors associated. The things that you guys need to go into this purchase understanding is, what are your actual goals, right? Are you guys chasing monthly cash flow? Are you guys chasing long-term appreciation? Or do you guys just want to scale to the most amount of doors the absolute fastest, right? Because each asset class offers, again, a different pro and a con regarding achieving that goal, okay? The other thing you need to understand is your risk profile. Both of them carry risk, and we're going to be diving into the risk factors of each type of asset class as it pertains to Section 8. And then lastly, you have to understand what your budget is, or your cash on hand is, because both of them require different financial commitments in order to get involved with that asset class. So let's dive into some of the pros and cons about purchasing a single family asset first, okay? So we're going to start with the pros. Some of the pros are typically single family homes are much easier to rent to Section 8 tenants. Why? Because single family homes have their own space, right? Tenants desire their own space. The analogy that I always utilize with the clients that I work with is, imagine the government gave you a golden ticket and you can choose wherever in the world that you want to live, or wherever in the United States that you want to live. That could be a 2-bedroom shack in Jackson, Mississippi, okay, or a 5-bedroom mansion in Malibu. As long as both of those landlords are willing to accept a Section 8 voucher, you get to choose which one of those two properties that you would like to live in. Typically, I would say 9.99999 times out of 10, right? Human psychology is going to say, hey, I want to choose the better of the two options. So I'm going to choose to live in the Malibu mansion over the 2-bedroom shack in Mississippi. That's typically the psychology that comes into it when tenants are determining which of the two assets that they want to live in. Do I want to share walls with multiple other people, right? When I can have my own space and my voucher works the same either way. So again, a pro of purchasing single family homes is typically they're going to be much easier to rent because tenants will prefer a single family home over an apartment style living, okay? The next thing that you need to know about single families is typically you're going to be able to collect higher rent per unit. Now, what does that mean? What I mean by that is, if we're looking at a 3-bedroom single family home and we're comparing it to a 3-bedroom duplex or a 3-bedroom apartment style of property, and the housing authority is advertising that they're willing to pay $1,500 a month for a 3-bedroom home, okay? Typically, the single family is more likely to achieve that $1,500 rental amount than the 3-bedroom duplex, the 3-bedroom quadplex, or apartment style living, right? Because even the housing authority understands that they're not getting the same bang for their buck when moving into a multifamily style of unit. So know that your unit rent is going to be higher for single family homes. So that's something important to notate and understand. All right. A nice thing too is, naturally, some people want to own their properties for the rest of their life. Some people are only owning them in order to sell them later in the future, right? So when you're dealing with single family homes, you typically have access to a broader exit pool, right? So there's more individuals that are probably going to be interested in purchasing the single family home from you than multifamily, right? Because why? Multifamily is a little bit more expensive and things along those lines, okay? It's also easier to spread risk with single family homes. Why is that? Because you have the ability to buy, one in this neighborhood, one in this zip code, 2 over here, 3 over there. You're able to spread and diversify what areas that you're buying in. Yes, technically you can do this with multifamilies as well. But again, if you're buying a quadplex or whatever the case may be, and it's going to eat up the majority of your cash right then and there, you have to be willing to endure the risk of that particular neighborhood until you've acquired more liquidity to go buy your next quadplex, duplex, triplex, whatever the case may be. So for single families, it's much easier to spread and diversify risk within a market, okay? And then lastly, one of the last pros of a single family home is the fact that you have much simpler inspections, right? Again, you're only dealing with one unit that has to pass. You're not having to deal with multiple units that need to pass for the entirety of the building to be qualified for Section 8. So again, something important to notate. Diving right into the cons though, when you're comparing apples to apples, The overall cash flow, though, when the building is stabilized, is typically going to be lesser on a single family home, as you guys probably already know. Again, just because the rent is higher, so again, going back to our example, let's say that 3-bedroom single family home gets $1,500 a month in rent, okay? But that duplex that has 3 bedrooms on each side only gets $1,200 a month in rent. As you can see, that duplex is now collecting $2,400 in revenue compared to the $1,500 in revenue that the single family is actually generating, okay? The other thing is there's typically a higher acquisition cost per unit for single family. Again, if we're looking at a duplex for $150,000, that means each of those units is worth $75,000 based off that asking price, compared to a single family unit where that one unit you might be acquiring for $100,000, right? So again, your cost per unit is going to be higher for single family compared to multifamily. And again, the more you scale up for a multifamily perspective, the cheaper it is going to be from a unit cost perspective. All right. The other thing is something called a binary vacancy, right? When you don't have a tenant in your single family unit, that means it is 100% vacant, compared to if you're looking at a quadplex and only one of your 4 units is vacant, you only have a 25% vacancy. So again, it kind of cushions your risk because it's not an all or nothing situation when you're dealing with multifamily, unlike when you're dealing with single family. Okay, again, important to notate. And typically, single family is going to take a little bit longer to scale because your acquisition cost is higher. Yes, you're able to diversify easier, but because you're paying more per unit, it's typically going to take you longer to scale to 100 doors compared to somebody that's only buying duplexes, quads, or triplexes. Let's move on over to the small multifamily pros and cons list. Okay, guys? So diving right into the pros, again, kind of like I said, as a con for the single family is a pro for the multifamily. So you have a vacancy cushion. Again, if you're dealing with the quad and one of your 4 units is vacant, you only have a 25% vacancy, not a 100% vacancy like you would a single family unit. Okay? The cash flow for multifamily, once they're stabilized, are going to be much higher, right? Because you're dealing with more units, more bodies in your units, and you're able to collect more revenue from the building as a whole. Okay? It's going to be a lower acquisition cost. Okay? You're going to be able to scale faster with multifamily. And you're also going to have a lower rehab cost per unit, right? Typically, if you're buying something that needs value add, such as a duplex, and there is work needed on both sides, you're typically going to be able to buy in a larger bulk amount for both of those units to be constructed. And so when you're actually breaking down your cost for rehab, it's going to typically be lower than what you're looking at for a single family unit. So that's something else that's important to understand when it comes to scaling with multifamily. And then last, you're still able to utilize residential financing when it comes to multifamily purchases like a quadplex, triplex, duplex, right? You can still use FHA type of products, conventional loan type of products, things along those lines, which typically once you get higher than a 4 unit count, you're not able to have access to those same products. So again, kind of allows you to double dip with residential style financing, but more smaller multifamily level acquisitions. Okay. Moving over into the cons though, and I feel like this is the cons that a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to smaller multifamily units or even multifamily units in general when dealing with Section 8. Okay, guys, vacancy times are going to be longer. Again, why are they longer? Because of normal human psychology. People are going to choose to live in single family homes before they choose to live in multifamily homes, right? So typically, a person that might only have a vacancy for 45 to 60 days as a single family, I see clients sometimes sit for 6 to 5.5 months before they ever get a tenant in one of their in either side of their unit, depending on where they're actually buying their multifamily. Okay, so important that people have the right expectations when going into this. Okay, there's typically a larger overall entry cost. Like I said, even though a single family might be $100,000 and the cost per unit for a duplex is going to be less each unit at $150,000, okay, $75,000 a piece, you still have to bring more money to the table ultimately in order to get into that multifamily unit. So the acquisition cost or your overall upfront capital amount is going to be higher. Okay. Again, like we talked about for the single family, you have concentrated risk here. It's going to require more capital for you to get in, and you're stuck in this one particular area until you have the liquidity to start buying in other areas to diversify your risk potentially. All right. And then again, you have more inspection surface, right? Meaning that, hey, each of these sides is going to have to pass their own Section 8 inspection. So if you have one Section 8 inspector on the left side that passes, you might have a different inspector that inspects the next side, and they might fail it for different reasons. So there's more opportunity for you to have to do more things to that multifamily to abide by the housing authority rules and regulations. All right. Okay, so again, at a glance, which is quote unquote winning, just an apples to apples comparison. Again, rent per unit, the single family unit's going to get more rent per unit, okay, but the cash flow is going to be higher for a multifamily. Okay, the vacancy risk though on the single family is going to be much higher because again, it's going to be 100% empty. Multifamilies, you're able to utilize other units to kind of cushion the blow of any sort of vacancy. All right, cost per unit is going to be higher for single family. Okay, total entry cost is going to be lower though for single family in comparison to. It's going to take you longer to scale to the door count that you actually want compared to multifamily. And again, you're typically going to have a narrower exiting pool when it comes to selling the asset whenever you're ready to exit that asset. All right. So again, this is the decision framework that I want you guys to take with you on how do you actually choose what asset class to purchase, right? So again, if you want cash flow right now, multifamily makes the most sense for cash flow right now, okay? But do you want to easily fill your properties with tenants and be able to exit the property in the future or later? That's going to go to single family, right? Single family properties are going to be easier to stabilize and easier to exit, right? If you're a person that's very conservative and doesn't like risk, doesn't like rent not coming in, single family is going to make more sense, okay? Are you tight on capital, right? Is your budget lesser? Single family is going to be easier for you to be able to get into that property or into that asset class because, again, it's more affordable to get into a single family than it is to get into a multifamily. And then lastly, is your goal to scale? Do you want to get to as many doors as fast as possible? Well, then multifamily is going to be the way or the route you need to go when it comes to scaling the absolute fastest, okay? So again, there's no universal winner. There's the right fit for your specific goals. So it's important to understand and to clearly articulate what your goals actually are. I hope this video gave you guys some value today. I'm going to start dropping more videos like this on a weekly basis. Make sure you like and hit that subscribe button, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Peace.